A number showed up in a financial report at the end of 2022. Not on the front page, not on the news. It was buried in the footnotes of a quarterly earnings filing from one of the largest companies in the world. The number was $935 million. That was the amount Caterpillar wrote off on its railroad business. Not a bad quarter, not a dip. A write-off, the kind of accounting move that means the money is gone and it is not coming back. To understand why that number matters, you have to go back 70 years. For most of the 20th century, one company built the locomotives that moved America. Electromotive diesel, EMD, was the name on the side of the engine that pulled almost every freight train across this country. Coal trains, grain trains, auto parts heading to factories, container ships unloaded onto rail lines that stretched from the Pacific coast to the Mississippi River. All of it ran on EMD power. The company was founded in 1922 in Cleveland, Ohio, as a small engineering firm building gasoline-electric rail cars. By the 1950s, it had done something no competitor had managed to do in the entire history of American railroading. It convinced every major railroad in the country to retire steam and replace it with diesel-electric power. The locomotive that led that transition, the FT demonstrator set of 1939, ran 83,764 miles across 35 railroads in a single nationwide tour and left a fleet of steam locomotives standing idle in their own roundhouses. When steam was gone, EMD did not slow down. The company spent the next 5 decades refining its engines until it reached what many engineers considered the definitive expression of American diesel locomotive design. The company had something no competitor could touch, a proven engine called the 710. The 710 entered production in 1984 and did not stop until 2015, 31 years. Every Class 1 railroad in North America rostered it. The engine displaced 710 cubic inches per cylinder, that is where the name came from, and it ran as a 2-stroke design, meaning it fired a power stroke on every single revolution of the crankshaft. That design produced reliable torque, and railroad mechanics across the country knew it cold. They had been maintaining 710 series engines for a generation. A single locomotive variant built around that engine, the SD70AC, sold more than 2,700 units across more than a dozen railroad systems. That is not a product. That is a standard. And then the government changed the rules. Did you know the same engine that gave EMD 70 years of dominance was the exact thing that ended it? Drop your answer in the comments and subscribe to American Iron Works for the rest of this story. In January 2015, the Environmental Protection Agency's Tier 4 emissions rules took effect for all new locomotives built in the United States. Tier 4 was serious. It required 90% lower particulate matter and 80% lower nitrogen oxide compared to older Tier 2 engines. Those are not small cuts. EMD's engineers had expected the 710 could be modified to meet the new standard. They were wrong. The 2-stroke design at the heart of the 710 could not be adapted to meet Tier 4 chemistry. No modification, no workaround. The engine that had powered American freight for 31 years was legally disqualified from going into any new locomotive built after January 1st, 2015. EMD had 2 choices: walk away from the new locomotive market or build a new engine from scratch. They chose to build. The new engine was called the 1010. It was a 12-cylinder, 4-stroke design, producing 4,400 horsepower. To meet the emissions standard, it used a system called exhaust gas recirculation, known as EGR. The way EGR works is straightforward. Instead of letting hot exhaust gases escape straight out of the engine, a portion of those gases are cooled and fed back into the combustion chamber. When those cooler gases mix with the incoming air, they lower the peak temperature inside the cylinder. Lower peak temperature means less nitrogen oxide forms, no extra fluid, no extra storage tank. The emission reduction happens inside the engine itself. On paper, it was a clean solution. EMD's launch customer for the new locomotive, the SD-70 ACE T4, was Union Pacific, the largest railroad in the United States. 32,000 miles of track across 23 states. Union Pacific ordered approximately 100 units. The first delivery arrived in November 2016. By the summer of 2018, all roughly 100 locomotives were on Union Pacific's property. Within 2 years, the entire fleet was in storage. The $935 million write-down that showed up in Caterpillar's books. 4 years later, traces directly to what happened between November 2016 and the summer of 2018. To understand it, you have to understand what Union Pacific needed from a locomotive. A railroad that size runs on availability. The mechanical team's job was to keep 90% of the active fleet ready to move at any given time. That is not a preference. It is the difference between meeting freight schedules and losing customers to a competitor. Every mainline shutdown cost money beyond the repair bill itself. A single unscheduled stop on a priority route averaged $12,500 in crew overtime, replacement power costs, and lost train slots. Across a fleet of 100 locomotives logging multiple failures per unit, those costs compounded fast. A new locomotive is supposed to beat the 90% availability benchmark, not struggle below it. The SD-70 ACE T4 did not beat it. Fleet availability for the T4 units hovered near 78%, 12 points below the threshold Union Pacific required from its active fleet. Field reports started coming in within months of the first deliveries. Units were shutting down in the middle of runs, sometimes with no warning. The cab display would flash a series of error codes, power would drop, and the locomotive would stop on the main line, sometimes with a train behind it stretching back over a mile. Shop foremen noted that the T4 units were spending double and sometimes triple the expected hours out of service compared to the older Tier 3 fleet alongside them. Crews gave the new locomotives a nickname, Shop Queens. Not because the locomotives were fragile, because they spent more time in the shop than on the rails. The shop records from Union Pacific's service centers in North Platte and Ogden started filling with the same locomotives, over and over. Unscheduled stops, forced resets, hours lost sitting on a siding waiting for a crew to reset the engine control system. One specific problem kept appearing. The 1010 engine control software was not talking correctly to Union Pacific's distributed power system. Distributed power is how Union Pacific runs its longest trains. Instead of putting all the pulling locomotives at the front, the railroad places additional powered units in the middle of the train and at the rear. Those rear and middle units have to respond to commands from the lead locomotive in real time. The 1010 engine control unit, the computer that manages the emission systems and the engine together, sent back incorrect signals when it received those commands. The result was spurious fault codes. The system would read a false error, cut power to protect the engine, and shut the locomotive down. It was not a broken part. It was a software conversation that the two systems, one designed for emissions compliance, the other designed for distributed operations, were having incorrectly. Progress Rail, the division of Caterpillar that owned EMD, sent engineers to Union Pacific's shops. Firmware patches arrived, sensor swaps, new calibration procedures for the diesel particulate filter. One update reportedly cut the rate of spurious shutdowns by 40%. The fleet availability number still sat around 78%. For a brand new locomotive, that number should have been above 90%. The fixes were real. The underlying problem was not going away. Which part of that surprises you more? That the software conflict took this long to find, or that it could not be fully fixed once they did? In the fall of 2018, Union Pacific announced Unified Plan 2020, the railroad's version of Precision Scheduled Railroading. Precision Scheduled Railroading, called PSR across the industry, was a complete rethinking of how a railroad moves freight. The old model was simple: run trains when you have enough cars loaded to fill them. PSR replaced that with fixed gauge, joules, and point-to-point routes, fewer trains, more predictable timing, and lower costs. The direct result was that Union Pacific needed fewer locomotives across its entire network. The SD70 ACE T4 units, already cycling in and out of the shop at twice the expected rate, were the easiest fleet to pull from service. The entire fleet went into storage. And then something happened that put the whole story in a different light. It was not about Union Pacific. Norfolk Southern had 10 SD70 ACE T4 units on order. The order was cancelled. BNSF had 10 units on order. That order was cancelled too. CSX took 10 units on lease in 2019. In July 2023, the lease expired, and CSX sent all 10 back to Progress Rail. No renewal. The SD70 ACE T4 became the locomotive that almost every major American railroad touched once and decided not to keep. There is one more layer to this story that almost nothing written about it covers. While Union Pacific was storing its T4 fleet, EMD and the EPA's own rules gave the railroad a way to keep buying new locomotives without buying more Tier 4 engines. It was called the Tier 4 credit system. The EPA had built a banking mechanism into its compliance framework. Railroads that had already purchased a large number of older, cleaner engines could bank those purchase credits and apply them toward new locomotives that still ran on the proven 710 series engine. Those locomotives would count as Tier 4 compliant on paper because the credits offset the emissions, even though there was no EGR system, no new engine architecture, and no 1010 prime mover inside the hood. Union Pacific used that loophole. The railroad ordered 100 Tier 4 credit locomotives, internally designated the SD70H, numbered 8,997 through 9,096. Those units were powered by the same reliable 710 series engine that railroad mechanics across the country already knew how to maintain. The Tier 4 credit program gave Union Pacific a way to grow its fleet with compliant, proven power, while the T4 reliability problems played out in the shop. EMD's own regulatory workaround reduced the commercial ceiling for its flagship new product from inside the EPA's own rulebook. Here is the number that puts all of it into a single picture. Since Tier 4 took effect in 2015, approximately 1,200 new Tier 4 locomotives have been built for the North American market. EMD and Progress Rail built about 100 of them. The other company, Wabtec, the successor to GE's locomotive division, built more than 1,000. Wabtec's share of the Tier 4 market was more than 83%. Wabtec's Tier 4 fleet has now run more than 500 million miles. The first unit ever delivered, BNSF number 3911, handed over on July 31, 2015, has crossed 1 million miles on a single locomotive frame. That unit entered service 16 months before EMD delivered its first SD70 ACE T4 to Union Pacific. To understand how GE pulled that far ahead that fast, you have to understand the choice GE made when the EPA announced Tier 4. GE's Tier 4 locomotive, the ET44AC, was not built around a new engine. GE had introduced its GE Vo12 engine in 2004 as part of the Evolution series. The GE Vo12 was already a 4-stroke design. When Tier 4 arrived, GE's engineers did not need to build something new. They needed to optimize what they already had. Fuel injection timing, combustion chamber geometry, internal heat management, no external aftertreatment bolted on, no new tank, no new filter housing, no new software stack trying to manage a system that had never existed before. The result was a locomotive that met Tier 4 without adding a single major component to the design. EMD had no equivalent path. The 710 engine was 2-stroke. A 2-stroke engine works by completing 1 power stroke for every revolution of the crankshaft. A 4-stroke engine completes 1 power stroke every 2 revolutions, with a separate exhaust stroke in between. That separate exhaust stroke is what makes it possible to cool and recirculate gases before they exit. A 2-stroke design physically cannot do that. EMD was not behind because it made a bad product. EMD was behind because its best product, the one that had carried American freight for 31 years, was built on an engine architecture that the new rules made obsolete. there is one more layer to this story that almost no one covers. EMD had been here before. In 1994, the company announced a new four-stroke engine called the 265H. The 265H was built for a locomotive called the SD90 EMAC. Union Pacific was the launch customer. The 265H was supposed to produce 6,000 horsepower, enough to replace two standard freight locomotives with one. It entered service in 1998. The crankshafts failed. The cooling system overheated. The engine that EMD had guaranteed would work on Union Pacific's main lines did not work. Every 265H powered unit was eventually taken out of service. The engines were replaced with proven 710 series motors. Union Pacific returned its H-engine SD90 EMACs to EMD when the lease ran out. The 265H was retired. When Tier 4 arrived in 2015 and EMD needed a new four-stroke engine, the company built the 1010, a redesigned descendant of the same engine family, developed with modern tools and better testing. Union Pacific was the launch customer. Again. There is a version of this story where the 1010 was a corrected design and the SD70ACE T4 was a legitimate product with real reliability issues that could have been resolved with more time. There is another version where EMD asked Union Pacific to be the test track for an engine architecture that had already failed once on that same railroad's main lines. The market did not fully resolve which version is correct. What the market did resolve is the outcome. Caterpillar paid $820 million for EMD in 2010. The $935 million write-down came at the end of 2022. The company wrote off more than it paid to acquire the brand. In September 2023, Progress Rail filed a federal lawsuit against Wabtec, accusing the company of using its market position to shut EMD out of new locomotive sales. The antitrust portion was dismissed in June 2025. The broader case settled in February 2026 with no terms disclosed and no admission of liability. The SD70 ACET4 fleet Union Pacific, stored in 2018, was eventually reactivated after software modifications. Those locomotives are still running. EMD built the best two-stroke diesel locomotive in American history. The EPA did not care what it had been, only what it could not become. If this is the kind of story American Iron Works covers, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.